I will introduce Yona Abeddour from Ben Gurion University of the Negev, who's Yona is a second-year PhD student at the Middle East department there, and his research is on the identity and construction of Moroccan Jewish families in France and Israel, and it's interdisciplinary research that combines anthropological and micro-historical analysis. I might also add, just in passing, that's not here in your bio, but that he's an excellent documentary filmmaker and has made already 2 very fine films on Moroccan Jewry, and we'll be seeing clips from his research work as part of his talk. And so, without further ado.
Great, so thank you for the presentation, and I'm very happy to be here, and I would like also to thank ASMEA Association for this opportunity to share my research with you. So my doctoral research is entitled Negotiating and Performing Moroccan Jewish Identities, Second and Third Generation of Moroccan Jewish Immigrants to France and Israel. It actually focuses primarily on the trajectories of 6 families, 3 in Israel and 3 in France, who still, in one way or another, maintain ties to Morocco. But for today, I chose something slightly different. It's still about Moroccan Jewish identities in Israel. It will be based actually on a selection of interviews, filmed interviews that I made in the course of my stay the last 2 years in Israel. The interviews range from Attar, the spice seller in the Shuk, open market of Jerusalem, to a rabbi's memory of the kings of Morocco. There are 5 interviews, and therefore stories that add to the complexity of Moroccan Jewish identities in Israel. I argue that these individuals constitute a unique blend of self-understanding that reflects their Moroccanness fused with their Israeli contextual identity. They comprise a complex intersection between conflicting identities which contest narratives of the past. In simple words, the Moroccan diasporicity continues in fluctuating degrees to inform the daily lives and consciousness of these Israeli individuals and families. In February 2016, I moved from Casablanca to Jerusalem and to volunteer in a 5-month program. And coming freshly from Morocco and usually being introduced as such, stirred some feelings among in some Moroccan-born Israelis and Israelis of my generation who were curious to know about Morocco and life in Morocco. I was walking in the Shuk of Jerusalem, and all of a sudden I hear Arabic Andalusian music. And I precise that it is Arabic Andalusian music because there's also Moroccan Andalusian music in Hebrew. But this one was in Arabic, so I was intrigued. I stopped to realize where was I? Was I in the Medina, in the old city of Fez, or was I in Jerusalem? I was in Jerusalem. I stopped and I started staring at this person in his shop, and then he realized I was interested somehow. So I went in and I introduced myself and I said that I'm from Morocco, and he immediately switched. So we were conversing in Hebrew and he immediately switched to Moroccan Arabic. Ah, ولد بلادي, my co-citoyen, my countryman, thank you. And so I approached him and we started discussing. So I assumed, because he spoke flawless Moroccan Arabic, so I just assumed that he was born and raised in Morocco. Actually, that was not the case. After asking him about his birthplace, so he said that he was born in Jerusalem, and actually his name is Moshe, and his parents made Aliyah, they moved to Israel from Meknes. And this is, here I'll show you a short clip of him talking about his connection to Morocco.
في الباسبور ديالي مكتوبه غير المغرب 1 2 3 4 5 6 حتى 120 مع الله. انا اسرائيلي دي موالي اخلاقه في المغرب وانا اسرائيلي مغربي.
Actually, while I was chatting with Moshe, a rabbi was passing by, a Moroccan-born rabbi, and Moshe immediately invited him, come here, there's this Moroccan who's interviewing me, and he comes from Casablanca, and then the rabbi, he stopped, and I was like, that's why I was not filming him until now, until I got his permission, and we'll see him actually. So this Rabbi Dahan was born in Casablanca in 1956, and he moved to Israel when he was 6 in 1962. He moved to Haifa. This is a very, very interesting encounter that I will let you watch.
هذا مغربي ديالنا
Casablanca.
אני שאלתי את אמא, עכשיו היא עדיין חיה שתחיה, שאלתי אותה האם את רוצה ללכת לבקר במרוקו. אתה יודע מה היא ענתה לי? אני פשוט לא רוצה לומר מילים קשות, היא אמרה במילה בערבית לי אחדרها, שלא נצטרך לראות את המקום הזה. כל כך החיים בתוך אומה ערבית, אמנם אומה אוהדת, אבל אין כמו בבית. האמת היא שלא הייתי, ואני מאוד מקווה שגם לא אצטרך להיות. הוא ארזע שכנה שירה ذاتي خخامير في المغرب كانوا كيمشيو مع الجلابيه الطربوش ماشي بحال السكناج. حنا السكناج حنا فين موشة ابو تينو ايوا كنمشيو هايوا هذا ربي حايم يشوف دافيد سولاي كيجبالو اول شابو ماشي بحالو فهمتني. ها المغرب قالنا هيدا كتمشي.
The next interview is with David Bouskila in Haifa, in his home in Haifa. He moved to Israel in 1954 from Casablanca at the age of 17. Here I asked him about how he defines himself today. Let's see what his answer was.
Aujourd'hui, je suis israélien. Non, je ne sais pas, ni ça, ni ça. Je connais pas. Je suis israélien. J'ai Théodote israélien. Mes enfants israéliens, ils s'en naissent tous ici. Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. Thank God, alhamdulillah. So in 10 minutes into the interview, so why did you move to Israel? I moved to Israel because I love Jerusalem. So for religious Zionist reasons. So I said, my natural question was, so why do you live in Haifa, not in Jerusalem?
Moi j'aime Haifa. Ça me rappelle Casablanca.
So he lives in Haifa because both are coast cities and kind of they have the same vibe to them. And so he lives in a city that reminds him of his hometown in Morocco. I would like now to give voice to a young woman, Neta Hazan, who was born in Israel to a Moroccan father, originally from Fez, and to an Egyptian mother. Neta grew up on the notion of Morocco. I interviewed her before and after her first ever trip to Morocco, and this is what she said.
I feel very connected to the place without even to be there, because it's like it's my origins and it's my family and it's the roots, and I have my grandfather is buried there in Fez. But maybe I will come and it will be like the shock of my life, that I will like feel that this is my land and those are my people, that I will really like feel connected, or that I will feel stranger, and I don't know. אז הייתי במרוקו. חיפשתי את השורשים של המשפחה שלי. I went through a very, very, very deep process in Morocco, like because I knew that I'm Moroccan, but as I told you before, and I had this question with myself about like what is making me a Moroccan, just like the fact that my dad was born in Morocco. And then I just like I saw everything. I saw everything. I saw my roots. It's not that I just found it. I could feel it. حسيت إنه هذا بيتي، إنه هذا وطني، إنه هاي أرضي.
And I will end with this interview with Rabbi Israel Maymaran. He was born in 1937 in Mazagan, Al-Jadida in Morocco, and settled with his family in Israel in 1965. He actually received this year the prize of Yakir Yerushalayim, like a worthy citizen of Jerusalem. His memory transports him back to the period of the King Mohammed V, when he returned from exile and when he passed away.
Mohammed el-Khamis, Sultan al-Maghrib, est entendu dans toutes les rues, dans toutes les maisons juives et arabes. Al-Islam Tidna, Mohammed el-Khamis, Sultan al-Maghrib. C'était vraiment la joie, on était très contents. Ça, je me rappelle. Et de temps en temps, ça me revient. Et surtout, ça me revient les souvenirs quand il est mort, Allah yarhamou. Et avec tous les élèves de la Shiva, on lisait les Tehillim on priait pour l'âme de Mohammed V. Il y avait un groupe, ça je me rappelle, un groupe de jeunes qui passaient. Ils récitaient tout le temps. البشير النذير والسراج المنير سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه. Parmi tous les pays arabes, il n'y a pas comme le Maroc. Encore une fois, je le dis et je le répète. Allah ya'ammarha dar.
So as you see, a film can be made about each individual that we saw here. They're like short clips, short snapshots of their lives. But of course, for the time's sake, I had to shorten them to a few seconds. But actually, my intention was also to show the complexity of the Moroccan identities, the Moroccan Jewish identities in Israel, that there is not a static Moroccan Judaism. It's very complex. There is a very complex relation to Morocco, depending on also where people come from, what circumstances they were under, and where they come from in Morocco in general. Essentially, actually, these identities are a continuation of historical processes that already started in the country of origin, Morocco, and since they are not constructed actually exclusively within the subjects themselves. I'll just conclude with some thoughts in the light of what we have seen. So although Moroccan Jews left the physical territory of Morocco, they have actually maintained, as you can see, deliberately or unconsciously, close ties or ongoing spiritual and affiliation with the traditions of their home country. The first generation of Moroccan immigrants established in Israel tend to feel a sense of double affiliation. Coming in contact with the challenges of the new state, Israel, this generation had to deal with the Oriental backwardness that was ascribed to them. Some of them, as a consequence, experienced sociocultural changes through adopting cultural traits more congruent with the norms of the host society. However, others resisted those very traits of the hosting country through continuing to speak and study Moroccan Arabic. There are classes of Moroccan Arabic throughout Israel. Also, resistance of some Ashkenazi characteristics of Judaism. So they're really aware of their Moroccan heritage that they would like to keep and maintain, and they pass it on. Listening and performing Moroccan music in different venues and theaters in Israel. You can go to a theater of Tel Aviv or Jerusalem and listen to Andalusian orchestra, music coming from Morocco. And traveling to Morocco, which is also a very essential point, that they maintain this physical as well, not just the notion of Morocco, but they actually do go to Morocco to meet the birthplace of their parents or grandparents. Another relevant element, and I will finish with this, to comprehend actually this interest in proclaiming a Moroccan identity today is the remarkable treatment that Morocco gives to the Jewish history of the country, of Morocco, and to his Jewish subjects, both inside and outside of Morocco. The possibility of having a Moroccan passport for any citizen, for any Moroccan diaspora, no exceptions, the serious measures in protecting the Jewish community of Morocco and its institutions, the king's commitment to renovating and restoring Jewish temples, all these criteria have actually a crucial impact on how Morocco is perceived in the diaspora, and more precisely, the Moroccan Jewish diaspora. Equally meaningful is the historical memory of the Jews of Morocco. The carriers or the bearers of those memories, they naturally pass them on to their descendants, and they therefore become part of the family's collective memory and thus an integral part of their identity. These intergenerational encounters, which actually I did not highlight here, but in my actual research, I focus a lot on, for example, Rabbi Maymaran and how he interacts with his children and grandchildren. And there is a lot of intergenerational like sharing knowledge and sharing like where he comes from, and there is communication and there is encounter between these different generations. And so, which can actually serve as lieu de mémoire, to borrow Pierre Nora's term. The stories are interestingly of not far imagined country, but of a country that exists and it has its door open, which is an exception. I'm talking about Morocco, which is an exception, I think, in the Arab world, and I'll end with that. Thank you very much.